Yes, we're talking about this one. This is going to be fun. Hello and welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about Timelash, written by Glenn McCoy, which would be his only story for the series, and is directed by Pennant Roberts. This is a two-part long story, and before I even talk about anything to do with this story, just a little note. This was actually supposed to be my first Doctor Who vlog in which I had a guest. I invited my friend Jack to talk about this story. But sadly, because of COVID, because I'm filming this in October, and as we're in October, we're in lockdown and he's in Bristol. But so plans didn't turn out his way, and I'm doing this by myself still. I will get a guest at one point later down in the series, but you have to bear with me here, and hopefully they'll be a lot better because I'll have someone to bounce off to. This story is considered really unfavourably by the Doctor Who community. In fact, in the Doctor Who magazine's polls, which I have mentioned in a few of my videos, this story actually usually comes second to last, only be defeated by the Sixth Doctor's first story, The Twin Dilemma. So yes, it has a bit of a reputation for not being so good. However, there's a lot of things against it. For example, it was sandwiched between two of highly appraised Doctor Who stories, The Two Doctors and Revelations of the Daleks. Also as well, this was the story which had the least amount of budget to it. This was a very cheap production. It was also here that John Nathan Turner actually took 2 days off the production so that Colin Baker and Nicola Bryant can appear in a pantomime which I'd like to add they didn't want to be a part of. But John Nathan Turner liked to go into these Christmas parties, and so he invited them. He made it mandatory for them to go. So a bit of a strain was behind the scenes between our stars and our lead producer. This is also a great example of John Nathan Turner giving out the idea of getting some new talent into the series. Now that is a great and memorable, honourable thing to do, to get new writers onto the show and onto the series. And Eric Saywood actually really liked Glenn McCoy. However, for a completely new writer, prior to this is actually his third script he's ever done. He previously wrote 2 episodes of the BBC drama, I think it's the BBC drama anyway, it's a drama of Angels, and this would be his third script and his second show that he's ever done. And Eric Saywood said that he was a very lovely lad and a very good, talented writer. However, for a newbie for Doctor Who, he didn't get the time he deserved, and that's why a lot of issues happen in this story. So, is this story any good or not? Well, to kind of spoil it a bit, no, it's not any good. However, in my opinion, it is one of those stories where it's so enjoyable, it's so ridiculously stupid and utterly unreliant on logic that it precedes the boundaries of humour. But anyway, so let's get into the actual story. We start off in being introduced to this these group of people, and now we get to see the inside of their citadel. However, it seems like only 6 people live here, which you could actually understand as the people just keep getting murdered all the time as earlier on in the story, we get a conspiracy as anybody who goes against their leader, the Borad, basically gets sentenced to the Timelash, which is basically a portal which, according to how it's described, sends people back in time to the 18th, I believe they say it's the 18th century. I could be wrong. But anyway, and what I found really funny about just the premise of it is everybody acts like this is like the worst thing imaginable. If you get sent down the Timelash, you've basically in a faint of just horribleness, and everybody acts like it's worse. It's better to die than to disrespect the Borad and get sent into the Timelash. However, we already learned that it's a time tunnel that leads into the Earth's past, and so you've got like, no, don't send me away to a normal place on Earth where my mental capacity will be much stronger than anybody there. I honestly don't know what's going on. But anyway, and basically there was a rebellion, and a bunch of kids get sent to the Timelash. Now, two of the politicians on this planet, a man and a woman. This woman turns out to be the daughter of the leader. I can't remember what the leaders are called. It doesn't say. Of the leaders. So, and these two this man and this woman, they basically slowly start to realize that this is no way to govern an organization. That once this planet was famed and full of prosperities and helped with a lot of allies, but now there's basically untrust with people in their own city, and their allies are slowly turning into enemies, and they basically feel that it's the Borad's fault. And so the young man sneaks into the leader's room where he helps power the Borad, and they think that there's no communication technology there, so that they think that they're free from being overheard. But however, the Borad can overhear, and so the Borad actually takes them, actually kills the leader, and sends the man to the Timelash, again acting as if it was a massive kind of issue, but really it's not, let's be honest. Now, I know I don't usually talk about the production at the start of a story, especially how at this moment the Sixth Doctor and Perry aren't even introduced yet, but the set, just everything about this story that went wrong in terms of how the story looks went wrong. For example, we have an android character, a robot, and what they've done is they've got this actor and they've painted his skin blue with yellow hair, and it just looks really, really, really ridiculous. Pantomime in a bad sense. It feels like it's doing way too much to be cheap, and we get these sets which are really bland and just constantly white everywhere, that you don't really get a great sense of the place. In fact, going by this story, you could easily believe that the Citadel is literally about 2 or 3 corridors and a handful of rooms, making it feel so small. And Pennant Roberts, the director, as I've stated in a few of my other Doctor Who videos with talking about his directing, he's usually good at tackling more realistic, more grounded concepts, but when he gets onto the silly sci-fi melodramas of it all, it clearly doesn't work. And a great example would be in his last story he directed, Warriors of the Deep, in which, despite I think in that story to be pretty okay in terms of the way it looks, does struggle a lot in terms of directing a story, and putting him again in a very sci-fi-like story was just such a bad call. Sure, we get some really great moments here and there. For example, the Borad's office looks really nice in that really murky green, giving the feeling that some sort of unholy animal, some unholy beast is present. And that looks really cool. But the rest of the sets, especially the ones mainly set in this place, just looks absolutely terrible. And one of the big issues is the actual Timelash itself, as we as an audience are supposed to believe that this is a thing where not only do people get forced into it and get pushed into it, but it's also a situation where a lot of characters in this story just so happen to fall in it when they're set in a struggle near it. However, the way the set is designed, with the ramp that goes upwards and just the awkward shape of it, it's clear today that the actors have to kind of lean themselves forward and go, oh no, I'm falling! So we get some pretty hilarious moments. But anyway, onto the story at hand. So the Borad actually signs a new leader, a character named Trekker. Trekker is actually played by the one and only Paul Dowell. Now, Paul Dowell is better known as playing Alvon from the hit BBC or ITV show Blake 7, which would make this the second story in a row to feature a Blake 7 cast member as a villain, as this would be John Nathan Turner trying to get a lot of publicity, because Blake 7 was really popular back then, and I believe this was just when the series finished. So John Nathan Turner trying to get as many cast members as from that show as physically possible. And he rams it up here, and I don't know if he does a good performance or not, but my God, he's enjoying every moment of it. Each moment he's just smirking to himself, believing that he's tricked the Doctor and tricking the Borad and everything. And I really like some of the scenes that he's given. But in terms of his performance, you can see that just something isn't working, and him as the main antagonist comes off a bit heavy-handed. But anyway, because the girl's partner was basically getting sent to the Timelash, she takes Trekker's amulet, which allows Borad his power, and so she takes it and actually goes into the Timelash, where she gets through the time tunnel. And whilst this is going on, the Doctor and Perry are travelling in the TARDIS, and because they interfered into the time tunnel, she was actually knocked off course a little bit into, I believe, a little bit into the future to where she was supposed to be. I believe she said 1889. I could be wrong. I'm not. 19th century Scotland. That's what it says on the back. And she meets up with a character called Harold. I can't remember. God's sakes. I'm just going to spoil it for you. It turns out this character is H.G. Wells. So I'm just going to call him H.G. Wells. But anyway, another big issue with this story is that Glenn McCoy, when he wrote this story, they found that his script was a bit lacking in terms of time. So they made him basically extend a few scenes, and no more is that prominent than in the TARDIS scene, specifically the start of it and later on near the end of the story. Here, the Doctor and Perry seem to have been calming down through the majority of their stories. From the twin dilemma to the two Doctors, their relationship was getting easier and easier and easier for them to work together and coalesce. However, here, somehow, for some reason, maybe because of the gigantic mess behind the scenes, we are going back to a very arrogant and very melodramatic Sixth Doctor, as he's mapping out a course on a star chart, and he's just basically having a go at Perry, who doesn't really know where to go, but she wants basically a plan, a travelling plan, than just endless wandering, and the Doctor just really takes it out on her. And as well with this scene, it just feels like filler. Although a nice little reference is the actual map, the star chart. I believe it's actually from Adric's bedroom. Last seen in Terminus, I believe it was. I could be wrong. But anyway, we get a lot of talking in this scene and even Nicola Bryant stated on the documentary, this is her weakest performance, and the Doctor seems really arrogant towards her, seems to really want to shout in her face. There's a great moment, at least I think it was funny, but in terms of the story, it really doesn't work, where the Doctor's basically working out, trying to figure something out, and Perry is like, is that bad? 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 And then he walks behind her, clicks up the buttons, and then shouts at her again, bad? And Perry kind of flinches. He's like, oh my god, has the Sixth Doctor hit Perry? That's kind of disturbing. Now, I actually have a fan theory on why the Sixth Doctor is a bit more dramatic in this story. Although obviously I didn't consider this when I was doing these marathons, because I want to stay close to whatever's official, as close as possible. I've been using the iSpider.com website to look at my as a reference points for this massive timeline. But my fan theory is that Timelash actually takes place before many of the stories that we've seen prior, and that's why the Sixth Doctor is a lot more dramatic in the story, because from his point of view, he still have just regenerated. That's what I've taken out from this story. But anyway, so the TARDIS gets dragged into this time tunnel going upwards from the Timelash, as this woman goes the other way and meets H.G. Wells, who believes that she's a spirit. And so the Doctor goes to this planet, I believe it's called Kafel, which the Doctor actually explains that he's actually been there before. And we get little references throughout the story of a previous era with a picture of Joe Grant actually appears, and Perry actually names her Joe Grant. And later on we actually find a painting of the Third Doctor. And what's really cool about this is watching these back to back from the two Doctors to this. It kind of shows two different eras of the show, as that shows the Second Doctor era, and how this represents the Third Doctor era, for better or for worse. And personally, I actually really like the idea of this being a technically a sequel to a Unheard Adventure, explaining how the Doctor knows this race and knows this environment and everything that go along with it. It also makes the story a lot more picky in its plot, and Trekker comes up with this plan to basically treat them as guests until they can separate them, and then basically tell the Doctor to go and get the amulet, otherwise they're going to kill Perry. And so the Doctor does. He goes to the past on Earth, retrieves the lady, and also meets H.G. Wells, although at this point he doesn't know. Like I said, this turns out to be a twist at the very end. And I don't know what to feel about H.G. Wells in this story. In terms of a character, I actually really like his personality in this. Somebody who just doesn't listen to anybody, and he's the kind of person who would apologise later, and regret things later, rather than think about stuff in the moment. For example, when he discovers that the Doctor has a time machine, he desperately wants to go, and the Doctor's like, "No, you can't come with me. It is the end. That is it. I can't take you. I'll mess up time as physically as possible." And H.G. Wells is like, "Please, can I?" It's like, "No." And then it's like, "All right, okay then. I'll see you later. I'll see you around, hopefully." But he kind of sneaks through the back and actually goes into the TARDIS. And he does this a lot in the adventure, where he gets strict instructions by the Doctor, because otherwise he'll mess up time, only for him to basically disobey him as soon as the Doctor leaves the room. And like I said, I think the character, in terms of a personality, is a very nice piece, and I really like the actor who plays him. But in terms of the plot, the one that we're given, this means that we get hundreds upon hundreds of scenes where we have him and the Doctor basically arguing, and the Doctor gets really pissed with H.G. Wells and finds him absolutely irritated, and it just fills me with glee. Colin Baker just hams it up, and I absolutely love it. But anyway, because of this aspect of the story, we get a lot of scenes in which H.G. Wells and the Doctor argue on whether he can go with the Doctor or not. And each scene takes around 5 to 6 minutes, only then to the Doctor to leave, and H.G. Wells just follows anyway, making the entire scene redundant. This will become more and more painful for a viewing audience later down the story. But anyway, the Borad basically sees Perry through some cameras and wants her captured alive by sending his androids. Something I forgot to mention as well. They wanted all the androids to look the same, so they only had one actor. So what they have done is basically have him in different scenes. So you never see the same android in the same scene. Two androids in the same scene, sorry. And you never get the impression that there are more than one android. It always, despite the dialogue, you only feel like there's this one android and that's it. Especially when a android gets destroyed later on in the story. We never see an android again. So I don't know why they add there are loads of androids in there. I don't know. But anyway, Perry actually escapes the capital and lands in some of these caves where a bunch of people are getting attacked. However, a teleporting, burning android suddenly appears, and nobody really questions it until the very end, which I find really funny. It just kind of happens, and we as an audience are like, what the hell's going on? But nobody in the story questions it until until it later comes up to some explanation later on, which I love this story. This is one of my favourite stories. Easily number one. Come on, Timelash. God, I haven't even talked about the Borad yet. Right, so Perry gets captured again by these guards and basically gets sentenced to this thing where she has this device on her and she gets taken to go into the caves where a Molochs, a giant like Loch Ness creature inhabits and is going to try and eat her. And we later learn then that after the Doctor has rescued the amulet, Trekker actually tries to sentence the Doctor into the Timelash. However, the Doctor escapes after a battle ensues, and they get locked behind these doors, and the Doctor comes up with this device which allows him to send the light force of himself 10 seconds into the future, which basically gives him a technically invisibility, as basically when he moves, his physical appearance stays where it is. A good example is actually you see him sitting there, and one character puts his hand through him, and it goes right through him, and then suddenly two characters get pushed back by nothing, and then the Doctor, the appearance of the Doctor, gets up, goes near them, and goes to imply that basically that they are now catching up with time, which is a really cool idea. Though as soon as they address it, you know where the plot is kind of go, and it doesn't actually take advantage of it. So anyway, the Doctor also makes a gun which kind of can send people into the past or into the future, but the Doctor can't work it in time, so that and is struggling to try and get it to work. He wants it to send them into the future, but instead it can only send them an hour into the past. Here is where we get the characters going, wait a minute, that android just randomly appeared bursting in flames, and that was almost an hour ago. So if the Doctor used that gun on the android, it will then disappear in the past where we've seen it in the caves. I really like this idea of something being just magically appearing later on and then later explained as timey-wimey later on. But like I said, none of the characters nearly even reference it. So when it actually happens, you kind of go, oh yeah, that scene. That was very odd. But yeah, so let's get on to, I think, what everybody really wants to talk about, as Trekker takes one of his counsellors to meet the Borad, as he's come up with this plan on setting one of Cafel's old allies into war with them, and they're basically going to go up and send for Borad's help, but also he also wants to talk to him about something else, about the rebellion. And we get a great scene where Trekker's like, I'm going to ask the Borad for you to be my right-hand man. Come on. And then they go into the Borad's office, and he's like, we have the leader of the traitor. He's right here. I really like that scene. That's really funny. Throughout the story, the Borad has been using a robot of an old man to basically give his appearance, because in reality he is this deformed creature, which is kind of spoilt by the fact he's on the cover. And I bloody love the Borad. He's such a ridiculous concept. So basically what happened is that the Borad was originally a scientist who knew the Doctor back in his third incarnation. And he was experimenting on the Malrocs, the creatures in the caves, which is attacking Perry. And his experiment went horribly wrong with this spree that he had. And whilst this creature which he had in captivity broke free and tried to kill him, this spree emerged and it kind of merged them together. And somehow this entails having a longer lifespan and vastly higher intelligence, although now he appears as a weak, feeble body. And the Doctor basically comes in and uses his machine to try and find the button, because we later learn that Perry, that thing that he's attached to Perry, is actually this the stuff that will fuse her and the Malrocs together, so that the Borad could have a mate, and when they do mate, he can have offspring, so that he can continue this super race of merged mutants, which I think is hilariously stupid. He has one of the greatest scientific minds in the universe, but all he wants to do is to make people like himself. He doesn't even want to cure himself, which I find the most hilarious of concepts. And there's a great moment where he basically explains that he's going to kill everybody as a sort of revenge, and Trekker basically is like, wait a minute, you will not harm my people. I've let you in control for too long. And he stands right in front of him. And the Borad just goes, idiot, presses the button and he bloody ages to death, Trekker. And what's really funny is that the Borad's weapon of choice is this device which ages people to death. However, it's a gun that's placed right, like underneath, not underneath, but like right underneath the arm of the chair. And it seems to only fire like that. So his enemies have to be really close for this weapon to do any sort of damage. Which just, how was anybody afraid of him? I will never know. And so the Doctor uses his time device to try and wander around, to try and get the button to save Perry. However, later on, the timelines matches up, and the Doctor basically states, if you fire into this crystal, it'll beam back at you. And Borad's just like, don't fear my intelligence. He uses the button, and it actually the crystal actually absorbs his the beam. And the Doctor's like, I tried warning you. And Borad's like, no, you did this to yourself. 3, 2, 1, and then the Borad basically ages to death, killing him. Right? Kill the Borad there and then. Okay? So now the Doctor's main issue is try to stop a group of missiles from Calford's original allies, but seems to have failed in this diplomacy as they send a missile. And this is where I was talking about one of the TARDIS scenes just going on for way too long, as the Doctor goes into his TARDIS and Perry tries to stay with him. And don't get me wrong, in it on itself is a really good scene. We get a great moment where the Doctor's basically like kind of angry at her, like he usually is. And later on, he's like, come on, Perry, please, for me. I will be only a minute, I'll be fine. And then Perry kind of smiles at him and is like, I don't want to. You're being too nice to try and trick me. And then the Doctor's like, right, in that case, I will not be so nice. And he literally just picks her up, walks her off, and just chucks her out of the bloody TARDIS, which I find hilarious. But this scene goes on for way too long for a scene where it's supposed to be, where the Doctor is supposed to be in a rush to try and stop a missile. And this is what I mean by padding, as we're in a very highly intense scene, but just for the purposes of the runtime, and that the TARDIS scenes are easier to reshoot, I suppose. The Doctor and Perry just debate for so long that we as a viewing audience, especially seeing where the Doctor and Perry have been basically in worse situations, the Doctor doesn't just go, okay, very well, but be quiet and stay out of the way. So that scene is like really painful, but we get some really, not great, but very lively Colin Baker moments. In fact, in the DVD documentary, Eric Saywood criticised both Colin Baker and Nicola Bryant's performance in this story, believing that they were too hyper, and he feels that the reasoning being is the rough schedule, because they had to take part in John Nathan Turner's pantomime during this adventure, and so they were really trying to get it done. Like, and what's really worse about this is that when it's over, when Perry gets taken out of the TARDIS and Doctor materializes, we get the exact same scene, only with H.G. Wells, which I will admit is a lot better, because H.G. Wells' personality really fits this situation, and the Doctor gets really annoyed. You even hear Colin Baker grunting at his teeth to shut up! As H.G. Wells is like, always as a boy I didn't like playing cricket because I was petrified, but look at me now, basically facing up to danger on basically a suicide mission. If only the boys at school could see me now. And the Doctor just really gets fumed at him. One of my favourite pieces of dialogue is when the Doctor basically accepts, because the TARDIS is already going and he can't just take the TARDIS back. He goes to H.G. Wells, right, look at that computer screen and tell me the numbers that appear on it. And H.G. Wells is like, right. The Doctor goes around the console. And H.G. Wells is like, what, this screen? The Doctor goes around, has like the face of just like that, and it's like, how many screens do you see? One. Then that's the one, and goes back in the TARDIS to do more calculations and stuff. And the Doctor basically explains that he's going to put the TARDIS in between the missile and the planet, so it gets destroyed in the atmosphere. But maybe the TARDIS will also get destroyed. The Doctor isn't too sure, but he tries his best, and we see the missile being destroyed. And then back on the planet, Perry is talking to an ambassador of the other race, this kind of strange snake creature, who basically explains that the Time Lord risked his life, and that they're going to apologise to Gallifrey for this inconvenience, and that they're going to organise peace, as one of the characters basically explains that they were under a dictatorship, and that but now their leader, the Borad, is dead, and now we've got a new leader. So he will now set up diplomatic scenes with the rest of the race. So, yeah. However, Perry gets captured by the Borad. Yes, the Borad lives. He's just so goddamn determined. What's really funny is that throughout the rest of the story, he was stuck in a chair. But now he's up, he's crouching, and the Doctor then appears, and he doesn't actually explain how he survived. And we get a really hilarious moment in which he's telling the Borad to basically let Perry, I'll make you a deal. let Perry look at you, and if she doesn't scream, then you can marry her. And we get a really dickish move where Perry is like, can I get a say in this? And the Doctor's like, of course not, shut up. Showing again the arrogance of the Sixth Doctor, which really actually doesn't work in this story. Here, when people criticise the Sixth Doctor for his needious arrogance and his melodramatics and his just harshness to Perry, and here it really doesn't work. However, so much of this story doesn't work that it kind of feels like unintentionally, intentionally funny, if that makes any like a sense. It probably doesn't. And after the Doctor breaks up the painting of the Third Doctor, which we previously mentioned, discovers that there is a mirror, which the Borad looks at himself and is petrified. He's like, please, no, destroy the mirror, destroy the mirror. And the Doctor's just like, no one will ever love you. You don't deserve to be loved because you're ugly. So now go. And he backhands the Borad into the Timelash. And that is funny. That is absolutely funny. And that's how our narrative, the story actually ends with the Doctor basically working out that he picked up H.G. Wells, the centre of the other side of the tunnel of the Timelash in Loch Ness, and the Doctor basically thinks like, I know he looked familiar, or he'll be okay for the next 100 years, basically explaining that or suggestion that the Borad is the Loch Ness monster. Again, something really stupid, but I think it's really funny, especially how John Nathan Turner had an unofficial continuity advisor with Ian Levine. He must have wasn't consulted on this story, or really couldn't care less. As an explanation for the Loch Ness monster in the Doctor Who universe has already been established with Terror of the Zygons and their creature, which I can't remember the name of at the moment. So officially, Doctor Who has 2 Loch Ness monsters. If you want to know how this is actually resolved, there is a novel. I believe it's either an 8th Doctor novel, or it's a Faction Paradox novel that basically time agents murdered the Borad as soon as he escaped from the Timelash, so that the continuity could stay consistent with the Zygons Loch Ness being the real Loch Ness. That's hilarious! And I wish that was in this story. It's also here where H.G. Wells basically explains that he wants to stay, but the Doctor's like, no, you've got to come back to Earth. And Perry's like, does he have to? And whilst they're talking to themselves, the Doctor's like, I picked up his card earlier because it fell, though this was never seen on the screen. And it's here where it's established that he is H.G. Wells, the famous author that wrote The Invisible Man, War of the Worlds, The Time Machine, and a lot of other famous science fiction, which actually Doctor Who actually owes a lot to H.G. Wells. This would be the last historical figure in the classic series, and another historical figure in terms of the TV show won't appear again until Charles Dickens in The Unquiet Dead in 2005. So that actually makes the story kind of important. And a lot of elements in the story were actually influenced by his works. Obviously, the huge emphasis on time is the time machine, and the Borad is like the island of Dr. Moriarty. I can't remember what that book's called. The Invisible Man with the Doctor's body being transferred around. So yeah, it's got a lot of H.G. Wells references. And so that's Timelash. Overall, on a objective point of view, I don't think this story is really any good, and I don't think you'll find a lot of people that would argue otherwise. However, if you are somebody who really likes this story, as in a genuine story, please comment down and let me know. I would love to hear your opinions. I really like hearing like unpopular opinions, but sadly for this one, I kind of have to agree with the masses in that this story isn't particularly good in terms of well written, in terms of productions, in terms of some of the acting and how the Sixth Doctor is portrayed. But it's absolutely hilarious. It's one of the funniest things I've ever seen, and easily is the Sixth Doctor story which I've laughed the most, and is probably the funniest story that we've tackled on the marathon so far. It will soon be have some rivals on that pedestal when we tackle the Seventh Doctor era, to give a little bit of spoilers. But anyway, that's Timelash. So join me next time where the Sixth Doctor finally meets with the Daleks, as Davros is coming up with plans which revolves around, I believe it's a morgue or a graveyard or a hospital or something, which revolves around dead bodies. So join me next time for Revelations of the Daleks, and I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-da!